Good afternoon and welcome to the Tibetan Buddhist Society's introductory class this week. We're coming to you online due to the COVID lockdown here in Melbourne. I hope you're all coping with the lockdown conditions wherever you happen to be and not suffering or struggling too much. Which is a good thing we have the Dharma to listen to and to read and to think about, to understand where our suffering comes from, why we suffer, and how we can stop it. So we'll begin just to generate a wonderful motivation of thinking of others. Generate a pure, good heart, the mind of bodhicitta, which means good heart, the enlightened mind, the conventional mind of enlightenment. And we'll do this session, these meditations, with the thought to benefit all sentient beings, not just oneself. So we'll take a few minutes initially to settle the mind, settle the body, just to be present. There's enough to about and stress about or worry about or celebrate after this session. So we'll just, for the time being, settle, relax, and breathe. So whether you're sitting in a chair or on a cushion, just relax your body, keep straight, neck, head slightly tilting forward, chin a little bit tucked in, arms by your side, the right hand resting on the left, thumbs joined. And you can either have your eyes closed or just very slightly open, looking down just in front of you. And we'll just focus on the breath. Very easy, just a natural thing to do, breathing. No difficult visualization required. Just observe the breath coming in and going out. If you can, breathe through the nose, otherwise through the mouth is fine. And just breathe. Just relax. Relaxing the body and relaxing the mind. And we'll spend a few minutes doing this. Just observe the breath coming in and going out. Slight movement of air through the nostrils. Breathing gently, relaxed breathing. Just let the mind settle. Mind rides on the wind, on the breath. Just relax the breath. Settle your breathing. Take it easy. Very gentle. Just enjoy the breathing. Just a few minutes to let everything else go and just focus on the mind. Relax. Just the breath. So hopefully you're a little relaxed and settled and present. You just keep gently the sensation of breathing. The topics for this week. But firstly, just to reflect, to recall last week's topic on karma. Karma being the law of cause and effect. That any action of body, speech or mind as an effect. Just recollect that karma, from little karmas, big karmas grow. But from a small seed, in the right conditions, great trees grow. And the seed, the result of the seed, can be different to the seed itself. So if we plant a eucalypt, you don't get peach trees or carrots or other things. And so the same with karma. If we create negative karma, it results. Samsara and nirvana. So this introductory series is utilizing Geshe Acharya Thubten Loden's text, The Essence of the Path to Enlightenment. And we're up to page 85 for those of you who have the book. And we're looking at samsara. Geshe explains that samsara is the state of the body and mind of an ordinary being arising due to the contaminated karma and delusion. So there's karma. And it is the experience of suffering. An ordinary being is one who has not attained the path of insight. That's us. Path of insight is the realization of the emptiness of self and the emptiness of phenomena. Whereas a sentient being is any being who has not attained enlightenment. So Geshe explains, it is ordinary beings who suffer in samsara. That's us. We suffer. The first of the Four Noble Truths of Lord Buddha, suffering. Samsara is not an external entity, but the suffering experience of ordinary beings. The material world is not samsara, rather the place of samsara. So planet Earth is not samsara. It is the conditions, the mind of karma and delusion that is samsara. Geshe explains this very clearly, stating that sometimes we think nightclub is samsara, but in fact it is not. It is merely an environment inhabited by beings of samsara. And that, excuse me, if such material things as cars or televisions, fast food and so on were samsara, then we just avoid those and we are beyond samsara. But samsara is the mind, karma and delusion. And the person also is not samsara. Some very interesting things to think about. The person is a being within samsara because we possess the 5 contaminated aggregates, which we know to be, excuse me, the form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and our consciousness. So those 5 aggregates are the basis or label for what we call person, ourself. And the 5 aggregates, contaminated by delusion and karma, are what push us uncontrollably from life to life, rebirth to rebirth, experiencing suffering, experiencing the effects of our karma. So Geshe clearly explains this, very clearly, succinctly. Without any choice, delusions continue to arise, creating more contaminated karma and thus perpetuating suffering, rebirth after suffering, rebirth. And samsara is our object of renunciation. So we're not renouncing our environment, our work, our family, our friends, our partner, our life. We're renouncing suffering, our deluded states of mind. So the flip side, if you want, if you will, of samsara is nirvana. The attainment of nirvana is liberation. Liberation from the bondage, the prison, if you will, of karma and delusion. And it is nirvana is attained through the 3 higher trainings of higher training in ethics. Then we are liberated. The 5 aggregates are liberated simultaneously from all suffering. So our intention, our wish, our attitude should be to attain nirvana, at least. Doesn't require going anywhere special, it's just a change of mind. Spirit of karma and delusion. So Geshe explains that generating the mind aspiring for nirvana depends on being motivated by seeing the disadvantages of not being liberated. So to actually see suffering, the suffering nature of samsara and its causes, which brings us to Lord Buddha's first 2 noble truths: suffering, truth of suffering, and the causes of suffering. If we understand these, then we can follow Lord Buddha's second 2 of his 4 noble truths, that there is a cessation of suffering, and follow the path to the cessation of suffering. So the practice of Holy Dharma is quite simple, just requires action, just doing it. So take a few minutes just to reflect on understanding the suffering that we experience. So we know suffering. Suffering is all pervasive. We don't see it. There's the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness and death, which generally people try to avoid, to disregard, to take refuge in entertainment or some other form of distraction to avoid facing the realities of suffering. And at the moment with the COVID pandemic worldwide, people are overloaded with the awareness of suffering, anxiety, stress, exhaustion. But this is Samsara. But the wish for all sentient beings, not just humans, but all sentient beings, to be free from all suffering, from all sicknesses, mental, physical, emotional, free from all suffering, all bad conditions. So we need to develop strong, lasting awareness of renunciation, and not to think that when COVID-19 is just a memory one day, that there will be no suffering. Suffering is a constant in Samsara. But Buddhism is not about suffering. Buddhism is about attaining cessation of suffering, attaining complete, perfect enlightenment to benefit all sentient beings. So that's what we do. So Geshe explains the true suffering, the first noble truth taught by Lord Buddha. And explains that there are countless forms of suffering in samsara, which we just looked at COVID and a few basics. And that he also explains that in his Path to Enlightenment, this wonderful, extensive text on the Path to Enlightenment, there are the 8 sufferings, the 6 sufferings, and there are specific sufferings and so forth. And all can be condensed into 3 sufferings: sufferings of pain, changeable suffering, and pervasive suffering. So the suffering of pain and the experience of unpleasant feelings are the common lot of all living beings. We know that. We experience that. In ourselves, we can watch the news, see suffering, environmental suffering, climate change, forest fires, bushfires, earthquakes, droughts, floods. And the sufferings that come from these conditions. This is manifest suffering and it's easy to identify. And as before, Geshe says, the suffering includes the suffering associated with birth, aging, sickness, and death. or omitting the unpleasant as being separated from the pleasant. So we do have good conditions, being separated from suffering. And not gaining what is desired is suffering. And Nagarjuna, in his letter to a friend, wrote some pretty full-on words, saying, his friend being a noble person, said, "Noble one, be disillusioned with samsara, the source of so much suffering, deprived of the desired. Death, sickness, aging, and so forth. Give even your flesh to hear of its faults." We don't have to do that, hopefully. We just listen, think, and meditate on the conditions that we can perceive around us in the news. So we know suffering, that's enough. And we know changeable suffering. So Geshe gives some wonderful examples of changeable suffering, which many of you would appreciate and have experienced. An example of this is when lying on the beach or just out in the very hot sun, which is wonderful. You experience happiness. But in a short while, you experience the suffering of heat. To overcome this, you dive into cold water in the surf or the river and experience relief. Feel nice and cool, and it is enjoyable, but only for a while. You soon begin to feel uncomfortable, too cold in the water. So we can appreciate and relate to this changeable suffering. This is normal. And the third suffering, evasive suffering, is simply that the contaminated aggregates, the 5 aggregates, form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and business, conditioned by delusion and karma, are in the very nature of suffering. So it's very subtle, but it is just pervasive. And as long as the aggregates remain conditioned by delusion and karma, our experience will be a form of suffering. So, enough of that. Okay, cool. What is the true source of suffering? Let's have a look. True source of suffering. Second noble truth of Lord Buddha. Sufferings of samsara arise from the faults of delusions. And delusions form the basis of negative karma, which we looked at last week, which itself leads to death and rebirth, conditioned by karma and delusion. So the seeds of karma and delusions are defined as mental factors that, when generated, cause the mental continuum to be very disturbed. And delusions are also called afflictions, defilements, negative minds, and contaminated minds. Lots of words, but they're just delusions. So we have delusions, and they are the obstructions to the attainment of the peace of nirvana. So just sit with that for a moment. Just appreciate the source of samsara is karma and delusion. And delusion is the principal cause. So our deluded karma creates suffering. Okay, so Geshe explains, if there is no delusion, even though you might have countless previously created karmas, suffering would not be produced. Just as a seed cannot sprout without the cooperative causes of soil, heat, water, and so forth, negative karma cannot ripen without the cooperative cause of delusion. Having a deluded state of mind is like pouring water on a dry field in which lie the unripened seeds of previous negative karma. If delusions are present, even if there were no previously created karma, it would immediately be created and establish contaminated aggregates. So for this reason, it is important to apply antidotes to the delusion. So Vasubandhu, great Indian master, great scholar, in his Treasury of Knowledge explained, the root of samsara is the 6 subtle and extensive delusions: desirous attachment, anger, pride, ignorance, wrong view, and doubt. There are limitless delusions, but these 6 are the most commonly classified as the root delusions. So we can look at each of these step by step. If we know our delusions, then we can overcome them. Desirous attachment. So attachment is a mental factor that perceives external or internal objects as attractive, exaggerates their attractiveness, and wishes to possess and retain them. So without desirous attachment, it's very difficult. With desirous attachment, I'd say, it is very difficult to separate the mind from its object. It's like mental glue and clings to the object of desire. So just think of your mind of desire as like glue that sees something it wants and it gets stuck. And Geshe explains other delusions. Desirous attachment is like glue. Other delusions are like a stain. They stain the mind as dirt stains a white cloth. Whereas attachment is like an oil stain soaked into the cloth. So as we know, it's relatively easy to soak out dirt stains, but oil is a bit more of a challenge. So this desirous attachment is more difficult. So that's why we're looking at this one first. And because desirous attachment clings to the object so strongly and holds onto it, it is as though the mind of desirous attachment absorbs into its object. So like separating off from cloth, it is very difficult to separate attachment from the object. And desirous attachment encompasses desire, attachment, clinging, possessiveness, grasping, passion, and so on. And it's generated towards any of the objects of the six senses. So seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and just mind sense. Desirous attachment is therefore experienced continuously. As in the case of anger and so forth, it is not a continuous delusion. You're not constantly in contact with objects of anger. And it is the attachment that clings to self and phenomena as inherently existent, inherently existing from their own side. So viewing things as having no causes and conditions, but just existing from their own side. That is the base of all delusions and the root of samsara. So just recollect that, think over that one a bit, is the attachment that clings to self and phenomena as inherently existent or existing from their own side, existing independently. That is the base of all delusions and the root cause of samsara. The thing we need to appreciate is that knowledge in the knowledge is power. So if we know the causes of suffering, then we can overcome them. So knowing the delusions, we can then know how to apply the antidotes to them. If we have just a wishy-washy, some non-understanding of them, then we just continue to suffer. So anger is the second of the delusions mentioned, which is a mental factor that perceives its object as unattractive, exaggerates that unattractiveness, becomes antagonistic and wishes to harm the object. So for anybody who hasn't experienced anger, it's very good. Good luck to you. Good karma. Unbelievable. But you become angry at those who harm you, or at those who harm the people close to you, or people who side with your enemies or someone you don't like. And your mind exaggerates the faults and unattractiveness of the object of anger, and this escalates and becomes bigger. Big anger we can see in the form of war, and there are unfortunately many of those as examples to study, observe, meditate on the downfalls of anger. Anger creates the heaviest negative karma, destroys positive karma and the happy states of mind, and creates a sort of stress-related tension that will not allow you to relax. So we'll move to the third delusion, pride. Pride is a mental factor that grasps at the inflated feeling of being superior. It is a form of arrogance where you place yourself above others. You can generate pride in relation to your beauty, or your wealth, your family, your knowledge, intelligence, and so on. And when you approach the practice of Dharma with pride in your inner knowledge, and so on, your progress stops. So pride is a delusion and a hindrance. Pride prevents you from learning from others. The delusion of pride, Geshe explains, is based on the insecurity of ego grasping and is quite distinct from self-confidence and self-esteem. The next delusion is ignorance, which is a deluded state of mind confused about the object by being unclear about the nature of such things as the law of cause and effect, karma. The three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, are the Four Noble Truths, which we're going through: suffering, its causes, cessation, and the path, and so on. There are many forms of ignorance, but two are particularly significant. So what are they? The first is the ignorance that does not know karma, the relationship between your actions and the results, which results and allows you to continue accumulating actions that bring lower rebirths. And the second form of ignorance mentioned is the ignorance that does not know the true nature of self and phenomena. That's a biggie. Dependent arising. See self and all phenomena as just existing independently as they are from their own side, not seeing their causes, conditions, their parts, and our own mind imputing labels on them. So from the self-grasping ignorance, which is observing self and phenomena and grasping at them as self-existent or inherently existent, all the other delusions arise. And if we cut the root of self-grasping, they're actually seeing the true nature of things, the way things actually exist, dependent on causes, conditions, parts, and our mind imputing, then we can cut through self-grasping ignorance and cut through the delusion that is samsara. The next delusion, which is a mental factor that is two-pointed and wavers in indecision regarding, in this case, the subjects of Dharma. So the Four Noble Truths, doubting, thinking, nah, it might apply to Buddhists, but it doesn't apply to me. Karma, thinking that's their karma, while in thinking that one's creating karma oneself, and so on. So doubt is a great obstacle to achieving realizations. Also thinking that Lord Buddha and Bodhisattvas and all realized beings, they're special, and I could not attain that. I doubt I could ever do that. Having doubt in one's own ability. So need to cut through the delusion of doubt and aspire to attaining enlightenment to benefit all sentient beings. And then there's deluded view. Deluded views are the opposite of the correct understanding. So Geshe lists 5 major deluded views. The view of the transitory collection, so that is the 5 aggregates, and that deluded view observes the aggregates and conceives of them as I and mine. And it requires deep contemplation and meditation. But Geshe explains it is understanding with delusion, in that the observed object, a self merely imputed on the collection of these 5 aggregates, does exist conventionally. However, the deluded view of the transitory collection, so our form, feeling, etc., viewing them, it apprehends such a self to be permanent, independent, and inherently existent, when this type of self is in fact non-existent. So there is a dependent transitory collection, there is a dependent I, but there is no inherently existent I based on this. The second is holding extreme views as a deluded view that observes the I as it is conceived by the above view of the transitory collection, and holds it either to be permanent in the sense of being unchanging, or annihilated by completely ceasing at the time of death. So there's some wonderful meditations to be had here. We don't have the time today to go through all these, so I suggest you look up in your Essence of the Path to Enlightenment, or whichever Geshe Acharya Thubten Loden's Path to Enlightenment books you may have, and look at these deluded views. The third is holding false views as supreme, which is a mental factor that is observing the view of the transitory collection, these are aggregates, and holds any of them to be supreme. It has the function of exaggerating deluded views and giving them strength, making it difficult to abandon them. So this is quite heavy going for an intro series, but this is well worth reading, contemplating, and meditating on this. And the fourth is holding false ethics and conduct as supreme, which is a deluded view observing faulty ethics and faulty conduct, believing that these will bring liberation. So faulty ethics is practicing a code of rules, believing them to be pure moral conduct, when in fact they are totally deluded. And the fifth of these is perverse view, which is a deluded view that denies the existence of something that does exist, such as karma, or affirms the existence of something that does not exist. And the person who denies any relationship between negative actions and suffering and positive actions and happiness is an example of someone who has a deluded view denying something that does exist. So denying the karma or cause and effect of thinking that maybe Karma doesn't apply to oneself. Creating negative actions won't happen. So these are wrong views. And then in conclusion to all this, we'll have a look at Dharmakirti, his commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition, another great Indian master and scholar, said, by holding self, which is the sense of I, by holding self we hold other. Through self and other, attachment and aversion arise. And in connection with this, all faults occur. So quite simple. By having a self, a sense of self, and a sense of other, and then attachment and aversion, then faults arise. So we have to see these things as dependent arisings. We have a dependent self. We do not have an independent self. And the basic ignorance of grasping at the inherent existence of self is the source of all delusion. And Chandrakirti, in his Engaging in the Middle Way text, states, all faults and delusion, without exception, can be seen to arise from the view of the transitory collection. That's us, ourself, our form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors and consciousness. Transitory collection is the I. This is me, I am my transitory collection of 5 aggregates. By seeing the self that is the object of that view, a yogi refutes such a self. So for you, yogis and yoginis out there, observe the transitory collection, find the true nature of this self and phenomena, and refute their independent existence. Everything exists dependent. Nothing exists independently. And everything exists based on cause and conditions and parts, and the mind imputing. So we'll just summarize that there. Lord Buddha, in his Sutra on the 10 Grounds, states, whatever faults exist in the world all arise from self-grasping. If we are free from this conception of self, there are no faults. So by correctly identifying delusions as the true source of suffering, we'll be motivated to abandon all such deluded states of mind and attain nirvana, the next chapter. So that's what we're aiming for. Nirvana, cessation of suffering. And it is the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering. So Geshe in this chapter explains that the true cessation of suffering, when you've gained a complete understanding of the nature of samsara. So read the chapter again, think, meditate on it. By a complete understanding of the nature of samsara, through contemplation of true suffering and its source, causes, you will generate the wish to abandon suffering and attain its cessation. So that your attitude will be like person caught in a house fire, or a prisoner in a dungeon infested with scorpions, or Indiana Jones even, a pit full of snakes. As such a person would have a powerful wish to escape, so you wish to escape samsara. So that's the idea. Knowing suffering, don't indulge in it, don't dwell in it, don't create the causes for it. Know suffering. Know the true suffering. You know that, you've experienced it, you've observed it. Know the causes of it. And then know that there is the cessation of suffering, nirvana. So then we know, we learn the path to that cessation of suffering. So all of these chapters in the Path to Enlightenment are a progressive, it is a path to enlightenment. So we're progressing through stages to enlightenment, transforming our mind step by step. We don't need to dwell on suffering. We need to focus on the cessation of suffering for all sentient beings. So wishing to rescue all sentient beings from samsara and for them all to attain the state of nirvana. So Geshe explains, once you have properly established that the true source of suffering of samsara is karma and delusion based on ignorance, and that there is no other source, so you've checked it out, you know what causes samsara, what causes the experiences of suffering that are turn on your television and observe the news. This is the suffering of samsara. So we need to create the causes for nirvana for all sentient beings. So the true path to the cessation of suffering. So Geshe explains, from the point of view of the path of medium scope, the true path to the cessation of suffering is the attainment of nirvana. And this is considered as three higher trainings, which we mentioned earlier: higher training in ethics, higher training in meditative stabilization, and higher training in wisdom. Wisdom perceiving the true nature of self and phenomena. So delusion is the enemy that must be eliminated to overcome samsara. So there are no enemies. Enemies are not external. Enemies are our delusions, are our enemies. And the very foundation of samsara is this ignorance, misconceiving the true nature of self and phenomena. So the wisdom, which we step by step leading to the path to enlightenment, the wisdom perceiving the emptiness of self existence, independent self existence or inherent existence, is the wisdom that perceives the true nature of phenomena. So step by step, we, through listening, reading, thinking and meditating, practicing ethics, meditation, and wisdom, cut through the delusions that samsara. So gaining this wisdom depends on the development of single-pointed concentration, which is the second of the two higher trainings, and that in turn depends on pure ethics. So the motivation for all of these is to attain or be liberated, to be liberated from samsara, from suffering, and we practice to benefit all sentient beings. So it's not a selfish path. It's not a solitary path that includes and encompasses every sentient being that you can imagine or beyond your imagination. It's limitless, countless, numberless sentient beings. So practice pure ethics. Lord Buddha in the King of Concentration Sutra explains the advantages. One may honor millions of Buddhas with pure mind, food, drink, parasols, rows of lamps, for many millions of eons as the sand in the Ganges. But whoever, when the holy Dharma is about to perish, the Buddha's teachings are coming to an end, observes a single moral restraint for a day and a night, as greatly surpassing that. So pure ethics is quite powerful. Nagarjuna, in his letter to a friend, explains ethics as the earth supports the moving and unmoving. Ethics is the foundation of all good qualities. So just as the earth supports everything on it, all trees, houses, everything, all animate and inanimate objects, ethics is the foundation of all realizations and qualities. So this is the first of the three higher trainings, and wonderful reading. Geshe explains in brief, when we speak of the three higher trainings from the viewpoint of pacifying the mind, the practice of ethics helps overcome a distracted mind. So pure ethics becomes a distracted mind. Training in concentration, so meditation helps us to engage in meditative equipoise, a single point concentration. And training in wisdom helps us to free the mind from obscurations. So a yogi or yogini needs only these three to accomplish one's aims. So we'll meditate for a few minutes, just think about those three special qualities, the three higher trainings. Just thinking about ethics, pure morality, of body, speech and mind. with the single wish for all numberless beings to be free from suffering. So pure ethics creating no suffering for any sentient being. Then we have the higher training in concentration, meditation, training to place the mind single-pointedly on one object and not moving from that object. Relaxing the mind, focusing single-pointedly. So the higher training in concentration just to focus the mind on one object. So initially today, each week when we begin, focus just on the breath. This is a single object of concentration. And the higher training in wisdom, seeing the true nature of the mind, cutting through the delusions. Seeing the nature of reality as it is. Seeing the dependent nature of all things. That nothing exists independently from its own side. So just to summarize, Geshe explains that the three higher trainings are the path of cessation. So the Fourth Noble Truth. By practicing the path of cessation, negative karma and delusions are reduced and eventually eliminated altogether. If you wish to boil a pot of water dry, explains, by applying a high flame consistently, step by step, all the water would be evaporated. A very low flame, or even a high flame turned on and off, would not achieve this result. In the same way, so we need to think this, in the same way, by meditating strongly and consistently on the path of cessation, delusion and karma will be evaporated without a trace. But if your effort is weak or inconsistent, you will not be successful. Just as the rate at which the water evaporates depends on the strength and consistency of the flame, the speed at which you will attain liberation depends on intensity and consistency of effort. So we need to apply focus on our practice to overcome suffering. Then Geshe explains, although the three higher trainings of the path to liberation of the medium scope will bring the attainment of nirvana, it is not possible to bring the greater accomplishment of enlightenment without bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is our subject next week. Bodhicitta is defined by Maitreya. The definition being, bodhicitta means for the sake of others, wishing to complete, perfect enlightenment. So we can attain nirvana, complete cessation of suffering for ourselves. And with bodhicitta as our motivation, we can attain complete, perfect enlightenment. So from this week, we need to appreciate that samsara is any beings, not just oneself. And Lord Buddha and all the Indian masters and the Tibetan masters and all the great teachers who have realized and experienced enlightenment are not teaching just for worldly outcomes. They're teaching that all living beings can attain enlightenment step by step. And that our precious human rebirth gives us the best unbelievable opportunity for this practice of training in ethics and meditation and wisdom. So next week when we look at bodhicitta, we'll look at the path, the practice of the bodhisattvas and the six perfections of generosity and ethics and patience and joyous effort and concentrations and meditation and the wisdom. All of these combined with bodhicitta lead us step by step to enlightenment. So we need to understand and utilize our precious time. Use our mind to attain nirvana, the cessation of suffering, and to attain complete perfect enlightenment. In order to benefit all numberless sentient beings. So just now, in conclusion, just take a few minutes to settle the mind on the wish, the intention to attain enlightenment, to benefit all beings. So strongly have the motivation, the thought to the aspiration to liberate all limitless beings by having attained complete perfect enlightenment. So we can dedicate the merit, the energy, this karma, by thinking By this virtue, may all beings complete the collections of wisdom and merit and attain the two holy bodies arisen from wisdom and merit. May the precious superior mind of enlightenment be generated in those who have not yet generated it, and not decrease in those who have developed it, but increase continuously. So thank you all very much for viewing. We'll be back next week, probably online once again, due to the conditions, the karma of samsara. And hopefully soon we'll be back in Geshe Acharya Thubten Loden's precious holy temple, that you can see as my background here. And we can actually be in this precious temple. So take care of yourself. Be good. And practice holy Dharma. Overcome the anxiety and stress that you may be experiencing. Settle the mind. Okay, thank you. That's all.